In most web development, we have a web server and we have a database server. The database server is used to store values. So in this video, we will learn how to use Express and the MySQL database together in Node.js. In the previous videos, we had learned how to use Express to create the REST APIs, get, post, put, and delete. And separately, we had learned how to use the MySQL database with Node. In this lesson, we will combine both Express and MySQL and use them in Node.js. So what we will do is we will recreate those APIs that we had created for Express, but this time instead of using the local data, we will now run it through the database. So if you have not watched the videos for the Express, the get, post, put and delete, and the MySQL, how to use MySQL with Node, I would strongly recommend that you should first see them and then come to this video. So here what are we saying? We're saying create a server that serves the REST API get/server/students. So it will give us the details of all the students. And we want to use the table students in the database students DB. So how should we do this? So let's go back to our VS Code. In our VS Code, we have this file which we have created, student server db.js, which has the boilerplate code for Express and it's listening on port, and we have selected a port, let's say 2410. What we now need to do is here we will need to say app.get, the way we defined it, /server/students. And now we need to fetch the data from the database and display it here and give it back to the response. So that is our objective. So what we will do is we have created a module for database in which we will just store all our database parameters, which we'll put in here. So the first thing is let MySQL is equal to require MySQL. So we will use the module, the MySQL module. Next, we need to set up our connection data. So we have host, in this case it's local host. We have our user. We are using the default user root and the default password, which is an empty string. And the database is students DB. So we have set up our connection data, and let us create a function, let's say get connection, which returns a connection which we will use in the main module. So it just says return MySQL dot create connection data, and we will now export it. So export module dot exports dot get connection is equal to get connection. So we are exporting this function. So why are we putting it in this module? So that any changes we want to do, we will just make it here. So if we want to change the database, the user, the password, the host, we can just make those changes here. Let's go back to our main module. So now in the main module, let's use require to get the function that we created here. Let get connection is equal to require, and what was the name, mod db dot js. Now we have gotten the connection, so let's now use it here. Let connection is equal to get connection. Once we have gotten the connection, let's create our SQL. Select star from, and the table name was students. Standard code connection dot query SQL. There are no parameters. Function error comma result. If error. So if this gives us an error, what should we do? Let's do two things. We will just log it onto the console, and we will also send back in the response dot status 404 dot send error in fetching data. So there was some error. Otherwise, what we will do? Else response dot send result. Otherwise, we will just send the result. Once we have done that, our job here is over. So let's go ahead and run the server. So there is a problem here. It could not find the module. I did not put the dot slash. Let's run it again. And now it is listening on port 2410. Let's now run it in our Postman. So let's create a get request localhost. This is the get request we want. Let's send it. And as we can see, we have gotten all the details from the database. So we have gotten all the details that we wanted. So there are 31 students and we have gotten all the details. Next, what do we want to do? We want to fetch the details of the specific student whose ID has been provided. So get slash server slash students slash colon ID. So let's define that app dot get slash server slash students slash colon ID function. So exactly the way we have been doing it. Let me get the ID. ID is equal to request dot params dot ID, and as it is an integer, we will just put a plus sign. Once we have done that, what should we do? Let's create our connection is equal to get connection. Let's create our SQL. Let SQL is equal to select star from students where ID is equal to question mark. We will run the query connection dot query SQL. We have a parameter ID function error comma result. And what do we do here? If error, then we just need to console dot log error and dot status 404 dot send say error in fetching data, exactly like we did earlier. Else, what do we want to send? Now this will return us an array. So there could be also the condition that result dot length, this array is 0, which means then what should we send? Response dot status 404, and we will send a message no student found. So if the length is 0 of the result, which means we did not find a student, else what should we do? Result dot response dot send result the 0th item of the result. I forgot to type in an if. So if we repeat it, if there is an error, we just send an error message. If the result dot length is equal to 0, which means we did not find a student with this ID, we send again a status 404, but the message is different. Otherwise, we just send the result 0, the item at the index 0. Let's save and run this code. And now if we go here and I fetch say 2, so we get 10. If I fetch say 3, I get the 3, I put in 32 and we get no student found. So this is exactly what we wanted. So this is next. What do we want to do? Get slash server slash student slash course slash colon name. So given the name of the course as a parameter, we want to get the details of all the students who are enrolled in that course. So how would we do that? It's very similar. So let me just copy this code and we will modify it. So it is course slash colon name, that is our path of the URL. Here we get the name and the name is a string, so required request dot parameters dot name. Now what do we need to do here? Where course is equal to question mark. So that's our query. Select star from students given the course name and the parameter we give is name. Again, if we get an error, what should we do? We should send it back. In this case, do we need to check whether the length is 0 or not? So it could be anything. It doesn't matter to us. So we don't need this error. Else send the result. So we will just send the result, and the result, while we are sending it, it will automatically create the right JSON and send it across. So in this case, we did not check for that length because if you give a course name, it will just give us an empty array. So because we are sending an array, this will work fine. Let's test it. Let's create another one. Slash course slash say node. So we get all the students course node, course node, course node, and we get all the students. Let's test it for say JS. So we get all the students with the course JavaScript. Perfect. Let's do something else, say Java. So there are no students enrolled in Java. So we get an empty array as we wanted. Next, what do we want to do? We want to get slash server slash students question mark course is equal to React. So now we have the query string. So in the query string, we have the parameter, the course name has been given. And remember, these query string parameters are optional. So we could either get slash server slash students, or we could get slash server slash students question mark course equal to and the name of the course. So we will go back to our app.get slash server slash students. So that's the path it will match. So here we need to get our course. So is equal to request dot query dot course. So we have gotten our course. Now what do we need to do? We will need to modify our SQL. So depending upon whether the course has been provided or not, we will need to modify our SQL. So let's say let say options is equal to an empty string. If course. If course is truthy, which means we got a value for course, options is equal to select star from students where course is equal to question mark. So this becomes our option. And what would be our SQL? So if we can put it like this, let SQL is equal to, and we use our standard JSX expressions and dollar options. So if options is an empty string, it will become select star from students. And if options has this value where course is equal to question mark, it will become select star from students where course is equal to question mark. Next, we need to provide for a options here. So let's create let options array is an empty array. So if course is truthy, let's also push the options array dot push and the course name, the parameter we got. So now when we are running the query, we can just pass our options array as a parameter and we should be able to run it. So this is now, this can run and this should work fine. Let's test it. So let's say here question mark course is equal to node and we get all the students with node. Similarly, if I can say course is equal to JS, we will get all the students with JS. Let's put in say Java and we get an empty array. So this is exactly what we wanted. Next, what do we want? Get slash server slash students question mark course is equal to react comma node. So now the course, instead of having one, can have multiple values separated by comma. So how should we handle that? Let's go back to our VS Code. So how should we do that? Now in this case, in the course, we could have gotten the comma separated values. So what do we need to do? We will create an array out of it. So we can just say let course array is equal to course dot split, and what do we want to split on? Comma. So now this will give us an array. And now what should we do? So here it will become where course in. So we will use the operator in and give the parameter within these brackets. And now we will push, instead of the string, we will just push the array. So this is our options. So now we are giving it the array for the in and this should work fine. Let's go ahead and make that, test it. So let's say course is equal to React. So we get all the students with React. This is fine. Let's do Node. We get all the students with Node. Let's do Node comma JS. Node.js, and this seems to be perfectly fine. Let's do Node comma JS comma React. So we get React Node.js. And this seems to be working fine. Next, what do we want? Get slash server slash students question mark grade is equal to A. So we have another query string. We have handled course so far. We have another query string which is grade. Now, like course, grade can be optional. So some options have been given to us. Grade is equal to A, course is equal to React, and grade is equal to A. course is equal to React comma node and say grade is equal to B. So we could get any such combinations. So how should we handle it? So like we got the course here, let's get the grade. Let grade is equal to dot query dot grade. So similarly, like we have done for course, we can just say if grade. If grade is truthy, which means grade has also been specified, then what should we do? Options is equal to. Now, if options was an empty string, so course has not been specified, so we can just say if options is truthy, which means we had course where course in question mark, then what should it be? It should be dollar options, and what should we add to it? And grade is equal to question mark. This is what we should put in. Else what it should be? Where grade is equal to question mark. So depending upon whether the options was an empty string or not, we have constructed our SQL. The other thing we need to do is in our options array, we will push the value of grade so that we can provide it as a parameter. Once we have done that, so the options array, the options are right to the SQL query, and this should work absolutely fine for us. Let's test it out. Let's restart the server. So course is equal to Node.js React, that's what we had tested, and grade is equal to A. So we get grade A node, React A, JS A, Joanna JS A, Node A, React A. If I say remove React from here, so we get Node A, JS A, JS A, Node A. If I make the grade as say B, so we get JSB, 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 and Node B and Node B. Perfect. If I just make it Node, then what do we get? So this is fine. If I make the grade as C, and this is working absolutely fine. We could do it grade is equal to C and say course is equal to JS. So we get that also. So this is working perfectly fine. Next, what do we have? We have another query string parameter named sort. So we want to order the details by either name or course, and any of the three, course, sort and grade, can be specified. So how should we handle it? Let's go back to our VS Code, and here let's get our sort. Let sort is equal to dot query dot sort. Similarly, here we can say if sort. So if sort is truthy, then we will do a very similar thing. Options is equal to, now if options is truthy, does it matter whether options is truthy in this case or not? We don't need an and. Here we had to do that because we would either use an and or a where. Here we don't need it, so we can just say options, and what do we need? Order by, and we can just provide our dollar sort. So here we are not parameterizing it. In the case of sort, that's not a parameter, so we are just putting it in our string. Once we have done that, our SQL will get formed perfectly, so it will get the order by, and this should work fine. Let's test it. Let's restart the server. So grade is equal to C and say sort is equal to course. So JS, Node, React, and it has sorted it on. Let's sort it by say name. So Diana, yeah, George, then Kathy, then Mike, then Teddy, then Timothy. So it has sorted it on name also. Let's put it and course is equal to node, comma, say JS. So we get the course. So Diana, George, Kathy, Teddy, and they're getting here. Let's change the grade. So we get Albert, then Jill, and then Joanna, and then Tim. This is fine. Let's sort it by say course. So we get JavaScript, JS, Node. So this seems to be working absolutely fine. So next we want to do some posts. So we want to enter the details of a new student and put them as a record into our table students in the database students DB. So how should we do that? So let's go here and say app.post /server/students function request comma response. Now what do we need to do here? First we'll get the body. Let body is equal to request.body. So we have gotten the details that were posted. Now what do we need to do? We need to put them in the database. So let me just copy the connection. We will need to create the SQL. So how do we create the SQL? Let SQL is equal to insert into student, name of students. What all values do we need to insert? Name, course, grade, and city. And we can just say values. So there are two ways we can do it. We can provide it all the values. So let's do that first. Values, value, and the 4 values. Let's do that. Once we have done that, we will run the query. So let me just run the query. Let me just copy this code or let's type it out. So connection dot query SQL, and now we need the parameters. So what will be the parameters? We need to put them in an array. So body dot name. Why body dot name first? Because in our here name is the first parameter, then course, body dot course, body dot grade, body dot city. So we have put them in an array, and then the standard stuff, function error comma result. If error, what do we do? Console.log error. Let's send say a 404, send error in inserting data. Else what do we want? Else response dot send. Now we could send just a success, let's call it say post success, ID of new student is, so if you want the ID, so let's just convert it into say, and let's get the ID dollar result dot, how do we get the ID? Insert ID. So from the result dot insert ID we can get it and we can send it back. Let's go ahead and test this. Let's go back and let's create a new one. It's a post slash student slash servers. Now we need to put a body. It's raw JSON. Now what all do we need here? Say name is Jonathan. Course is a Node. Grade is A, and city is London. So that's the details we want to send. Let's send it. And we got a post success. ID of new student is 32. Let's go ahead and test it. So 32, earlier we had gotten a no student found, and we get ID 32 and those details. So we have successfully inserted the details of the new student into the table. Next, what do we want to do? We want to ensure that the name is unique. So if we insert another student with the same name, we do not want the insert to happen. We want it to send back a response saying, no, this name already exists. So that's the objective we have. So how should we do it? Now, typically in databases, we will make these as say unique or something. But here what we will do is we will run a query for the name. If we get something matching, we will not send, we will not insert, otherwise we will insert. So let's first create a query. Let SQL1 is equal to select star from students where name is equal to question mark. So we will run this query. Let's run this query. Connection dot query SQL1 comma, what should be the parameter? Body dot name comma function error comma result. Now what should we do? If error, then we will do our standard. So let me just copy that. Else, if result dot length is greater than 0. So if the length is greater than 0, that means again we have found a student with the same name. So we will just send result dot status, say again say a 404 dot send, and we can just say duplicate, or let's say name already exists. And what's the name? Body dot name. Else what do we want to do? If all this has happened, and then we want to insert it. So how should we write that insert? Remember, this is asynchronous, so we will need to put it here. If you put it after this like it's running, then obviously this will not work because these queries work async. So we will let me just put this code in here. So what are we doing? Connection.query, we run it, and let me call this SQL2. We checked, we sent the error responses. Otherwise, if the condition we wanted is satisfied, then we have just inserted the details. Let's save it and run this. And let's try and insert the same data that we had inserted earlier. If I send this now, what do I get? Name already exists, Jonathan. Now, instead of this, if we say send a name like say Gulliver, and now I send it, we get a post success. ID of new student is 33. Let's test 33. And we get those details. If I try and insert Gulliver again, it should give me an error. And it gives me a 404 error. 404, name already exists, Gulliver. So this is how we can handle that. Next, what do we want to do? Put /server/students:/id. So we want to update the details of the student whose ID has been specified, and the updated details have also been given. So let's do that. app.put/server/students/:id. Now, what all parameters do we get here? We will get the ID. So let ID is equal to request.params.id, and we will get a body, request.body. So now what do we need to do? Let's create our SQL. First let's get our connection. Let connection is equal to get connection. Next, let's make our SQL update students set name is equal to question mark, course equal to question mark, grade equal to question mark, and city equal to question mark. These are our 4 fields, so we are updating them. Where ID is equal to question mark. So given the specified ID, we are updating these 4 fields. So that is our SQL. What should our params be? So we need body.name, body.course, body.grade, body.city, and then finally ID. That's the order of our parameters. Now we'll just run our query, connection.query SQL, comma, params, comma, function error, comma, result. Now here, if error, we will do our standard stuff. So let me just copy that. Error in updating data. Else if result dot affected rows. Now what does affected rows give us? Affected rows gives us the number of rows that were affected. If this is 0, which means again nothing got updated, so let's just send back the same stuff. Status send no update happened. else we can just send dot send update success. So our update was successful. So this is what we can do. So if there were no affected rows, if there was an update that happened, we would have gotten affected rows equal to 1. That did not happen, so we send that. Otherwise, we have sent an update success. Let's save this and run the server again. And how should we test it? So let's, instead of post, let me make it put. And let's say we change the name of Gulliver to Gulliver Swift. And we have gotten an error here. Why? Because we did not specify the ID. What was the ID of Gulliver? 33. That was Gulliver's ID? Yes. So we got an update success. If I specify the ID as 34, what should happen? No update happened because nothing is there at ID 34. So no update happened. So our affected rows were 0 and we got no update happened. Next, what do we want to do? Delete /server/students/:id. So similar to update, we want to delete. So let me just copy the update and then we'll modify it. So this should be delete. And in the case of delete, we don't get a body, so I don't need that. What should it be our query? Delete from students where ID is equal to the specified ID. So given that ID, we will just delete from students. We don't need params. What will be the parameter here? ID. So error in deleting data. If we get an error, if affected rows is 0, so no delete happened. Otherwise, a delete success. So very similar. So the query would be delete from students where ID is the specified ID. If we get an error, so error in deleting data. If affected rows is 0, which means no delete happened, so we sent a message, no delete happened. Otherwise, our delete was successful. Let's run it to test it. So which one should we delete? Let's delete 34. So let's make it say delete 33. So if I delete 33, delete was a success. And now if we try and fetch 33, we get no student found. If I try and delete 33 again, we get no delete happened because there is no record with the ID 33. So this is given as the right data. Next, what do we want to do? Get /server/reset data. So here we are wanting to truncate the table and then insert our existing record. So suppose we just want to reset it. So this is to just demonstrate how we will do it. So we will first truncate the table and then insert the records. So here in student-data.js, we have gotten all the data as an array of JSONs and we have exported it. So we will use that in our student server here to do that. App.get reset data. So what we will do is we will truncate the table. Why are we using truncate instead of delete? The purpose of using truncate is that the auto increment gets reset back. So if we had used delete, then that would have not happened. Let's try with delete and then we'll move to truncate so that that becomes clear. So let's first create a connection. Delete from students. So we'll just run a delete. And then what do? else. So if this is successful, if our delete has been successful, then what should we do? Let's just do a console.log success deletion. Let's call it deletion success deleted and result dot affected rows. So we deleted so many rows. So that's our message. Once we have deleted it, what do we want to do? We want to insert that data back into the database. So how will we do that? For that, first let's get that data. So how are we exporting it? Students data. So let's deconstruct it. Students data is equal to require student data.js. Once we have gotten the data, now remember this data is an array of JSONs. What do we need? We need an array of array. So each JSON we will need to convert into an array. So let's do that. Let arr is equal to students data.map. Each student goes to, we will just return an array for it, st.name, st.course, st.grade and st.city. So we get an array. So here now we have converted this array of JSONs into an array of array. Once we have done that, let's write our query. Let SQL 2 is equal to insert into students name, course, grade, comma, city, values, question mark. Let's run this query. Connection dot query. What's our SQL2? What should be our parameters? Inside an array, we will put an array, arr, and then our function request error, comma, result. So remember here, we have put this in the else because it is asynchronous. And now what we should do, again, we will check our error. Error in inserting data. So this was if this fails here, else what do we want to do? We will just send a response dot send insertion reset success inserted. And how many rows did we insert? Let's put that result dot affected as rows. So let's just send back this message. So we need to now close. This is fine. So this is now fine. So we can now test it. Let's save it and restart the server. Let's get all the students first. So we have from 1 till 32. We had inserted Jonathan also. Let's now run the get /server/reset data. So we have gotten an error. Let's test it. ID is not defined. Where did we use ID? At 135. We shouldn't have called it with ID. That was the error. Let's restart it again. Let's test it. We get all the data, and now if we get to our get reset data, reset success, insert 31 rows. It should be inserted. Let's make that change. Inserted. And now if we get our details, so see, our ID is now starting from 34 and we don't have Jonathan. Now if we had, instead of delete, used truncate, so instead of writing here delete from students, we can just say truncate table students. Now if we do that, let's see what we'll get. And let's now go ahead and run the get reset data. So we get inserted 31 rows. Let's get all the data. So we get now ID 1 Jack 2 Tim till 31. So that's the difference between the two. There are more differences between truncate and delete, which you can read to understand them. But here we have just written it to understand it. Also, an important thing to keep in mind is the way we have structured this code. So like in reset data, or in the case of post where we checked for the user, we put it inside the else. The other thing, say like in the case of get, our response.send is within this function error comma result. If you put it outside, it will not work because it's asynchronous. So these things we have to keep in mind while we are doing it. In future lessons, we will learn more about, say, promises and asynchronous code. So we will be able to restructure this code and make it more readable. But it's important that we first understand how to use Express with MySQL in Node.js.